you. Hello, everybody. I hope that you're enjoying your lunch break. So a little bit about myself. I have been teaching Nordic walking for about 15 years, and it's gone through its ups and downs of popularity, I guess I could say, but it hangs in there. We're still there. Nordic walking brings something for everybody. There is something for the fit and fitter, very athletic inclined individuals, as well as those who have some sort of an obstacle to overcome. It could be instability due to a medication. It could be recovery from an injury or possibly surgery. I mean, it could be just about anything that makes you feel just slightly unstable on your feet. And so Nordic walking gives you 2 additional points of contact with the ground via the poles. And the advertisement for this program gave you a list of benefits, and I'll just briefly read those over just to bring them to the front of the table here. We use 90% of our muscles when we Nordic walk. We use 46% more calories. We decrease load and strain over the lower body. We tone upper arms and shoulders, back. We build stability and strength, increase oxygenation up to 25%, and it's very low impact. So using poles gives someone who needs some help a little help. For someone who doesn't need help but wants to enhance their workout experience, it's a great tool to do that also. So what is Nordic walking? It's walking using specially designed poles. And there's Nordic walking poles and there's trekking poles. Now, the difference between Nordic walking and trekking is you can think of it as a mountain bike versus a road bike in bicycles. A road bike, it has very, very thin, smooth tires. It's made for smooth pavements. It's made for speed. Wouldn't work so well if you were going to go on trails in the mountains. And so mountain bike is going to have really fat, beefy tires, lots of spring and shock absorption, and it helps to traverse really rough terrain, hiking trails, mountain biking trails, rocks, dirt, and such. And so trekking poles would be the mountain bike of poles, and Nordic walking poles would be the road bike of poles. It's made for smooth surfaces, such as walking around your neighborhood, on sidewalks or streets. And certainly you can use either type of pole interchangeably. Your experience will be a little bit different. Not bad, just different. So Nordic walking is walking. We don't change our stride. Well, we do change our stride. We don't change the body mechanics of walking. We are just walking. The swing of our arms, turn to the side here. When we walk in opposition, opposite leg and opposite arm. It's how, as humans, we stay in balance. So in Nordic walking, we are going to enhance the arm swing. We're going to pay closer attention to it. So instead of walking like this, as some of us have become inclined to do when we're walking in the grocery store or going to get our mail, now we're going to really open that arm swing up. And it's going to match more of what we're doing with our lower body. And that arm swing is going to translate to the tip of the pole engaging with the ground and transferring that energy up through our body. And so I want to demonstrate this for you guys to be able to feel it. Whether you're sitting or standing, if there's a flat surface that you can press against in front of you, either flat palms down on the surface or fists with the pinky side of the fist down on the surface. For a moment, I'd like you to press down, alternating, kind of like you're milking a cow. And if there's somebody who would like to volunteer to maybe unmute themselves and let me know what you're feeling in your body when you press down. Do I have any volunteers? Sarah.
Well, I will. You can certainly feel your muscles engaged. And hi, Jackie. Sorry, my internet crashed and I was late. So everyone, welcome. Yes, I mean, your muscles are engaging, right? Like I can feel a tension there.
Where in your body are you feeling it?
So like shoulders for sure, arms definitely, but even like I would say back area.
You feel any core?
Yes.
Yeah. So all of, you can stop, by the way. All of these muscles that are engaging in this very simple demonstration, this is a sampling of what's happening every single time that pole tip plants on the ground and you press back against it. All of that is transferring into your muscles. And that's where that 90% of your body's muscles are being used in this walk. Usually it's from the waist down. We swing our arms when we walk, and there is some core, there is some back, just not very much. When you use poles, all of the sudden, there's a lot. You don't necessarily have a sensation while you're walking that it's happening, but it's happening with every single pole plant. That's where toning your upper arms. This actually provides a tremendous amount of core activation. And also, when we walk and we swing our legs forward, we use our hip flexors in order to do that. There's a number of muscle groups involved, but specifically targeting the hip flexors, that's an area that if you sit at a desk and work for lots of hours of the day, that's an area that can really become unhappy when you try to walk distance. And so being able to use the poles, there's some techniques that we'll talk about in a moment that will allow you to change your stride ever so slightly. And you can feel it in more of these muscles, and you can use it intentionally to target specific areas. So I did mention earlier why we would Nordic walk. It engages more. I tell people, you don't need to use poles when you walk. I choose to use poles, and I'm going to get more bang for my buck. I'm going to walk smarter, not harder. And I'm going to get all those benefits that you're going to miss out on because you're leaving, about 40-50% of your body out of the equation. So that's my why. Anybody can do it. If you're capable of walking, you can Nordic walk. Now, if you have a shoulder injury or something, there are ways of using technique to change it up a little bit so that for someone who has shoulder issues, we would use a different technique to take the volume down on the shoulders without immobilizing them. We're still using the arm, which is desirable. We're just not going to stress it out. If you are slightly unstable on your feet and that causes you to think, well, I can't really go for a walk around the park or anything because, I might fall, putting poles in your hands gives you those 2 additional points of contact with the ground. And for most people, it's enough stability to feel like they can be safe to go and take a walk. The same speaking if somebody is in some form of recovery to be able to get those 2 additional points of contact. For those who are dealing with body size and pain in your feet or knees, whatever, using poles allows you to take your upper body, and my hands are doing this and you can't see me. Using poles with your upper body, you can lift and take a little bit of the stress off of sore joints. And so by using poles, very often people who experience pain have less pain. You're walking with Nordic walking, more often than not, you're walking on a smooth surface in your neighborhood or around a park on a sidewalk. And so I encourage people to lift their heads up. So often we're looking down when we're walking, and that changes your posture in some negative ways, but it also affects your ability to really take a good, strong, deep breath. And so lifting up, righting your posture, as soon as you put poles in your hands, your posture comes right up. It's beautiful for improving posture. But then allow your chin to be parallel with the ground and use your eyes to just look a few paces ahead of you. Of course, we want to see if there's a crack in the sidewalk or a stick or something that could be a hazard. We definitely want to be able to see that, but we don't need to be looking down. So we're righting our posture, we're opening up our chest, we're breathing deeper, we're looking out ahead of us, we're enjoying more view of our walk. And so walking in beautiful places, actually making a plan to go take a walk intentionally is a great way of starting out too. Of course, I'm going to go walk around my block. Awesome. Say hi to your neighbors. Notice the squirrels playing in the tree. And let's see. I want to make sure that I leave time for questions and answers at the end, but I would like to talk about 2 things that are take up a little bit more time. One being equipment. I am very, very conscious of safety, and I want people to have poles in their hands that they can call upon, knowing that they're not going to fail. If I could do that inexpensively, of course, I would do that in a heartbeat. And I have tried to do that with my students. But unfortunately, I have not been able to find a pair of very inexpensive poles that have not failed. And I want to give you an example of what I mean by fail. This is a pole from a company that was trying to recruit me to teach for them. And I will talk about this in a minute, but this is the strap that goes on your hand. And this is the pole. On this particular pole, you can pull down and detach the strap from the pole. If I hold this up to the camera, perhaps you can see that there's a metal grommet here. The amount of plastic material on each side of this grommet is very small. These poles break right here. If you are someone who's using a pole for stability, that could be a fall. And so this is an example of something that's unsafe. These poles were they used to be like $60 in the day, and then the price went up and they were closer to about $79, $80, and yet the safety never improved. So you can go online and purchase poles online, and you can get some fabulous deals. What buying online doesn't allow you to do is to touch them and feel them. If you were to feel this plastic that this pole is made out of on the handle, it's very hard. It's very, very brittle. If you were to try and break it, it would snap easily. There are other types of plastic that are more pliable, malleable. Those types of plastics are going to be more desirable. You don't want brittle and snapping of anything. In the last few years, they've improved on how poles are made. It used to be that all poles had this swivel, where you untighten it and then you tighten it. And very often with cheap plastic, this sleeve would crack right here. And that would mean that this pole would collapse. Nowadays, most poles that have adjusting points have these clip locks, and these are awesome. This is, if given a choice, you would want something like this on it. So a trekking pole, this is a Coleman trekking pole that you can walk into any sporting goods store and buy very inexpensively. And as far as trekking poles go, they're okay. They're not top of the line. They're okay. A trekking pole has a strap looks like this. And it's meant for your hand to go up and then rest down on the handle. These poles are made to be used in front of your body.
You can see Lauren was going to ask the difference, and you're going right into it for us, what the difference the poles are.
Okay. I'm sorry if somebody from CLA wouldn't mind kind of
I'll do that, Jackie.
Thank you. I don't want to miss anything important. Okay. So a trekking pole is made to be used in front of you, because when you're out on a trail, having the poles in front of you give you the most stability. It also allows you to use the tip of the pole to kind of poke on the ground to make sure it's stable before you put your foot there if need be. Trekking poles will also have a swing weight at the tip, which means that the pole will swing forward from behind you with a little bit of weight and oomph to perhaps come through low brush or weeds more easily, in order to reach in front of your body and be there for that next step. That's because you're off-road. A Nordic walking pole is made to be very light, so that it's a part of your arm swing without it calling any negative attention to it. Most often, a Nordic strap will be a bit more glove-like, so that you can let go and you don't need to have a death grip on it. It will be there to call upon without you having to have a lot of tension in your hand. This particular company makes it so that the strap can remain on your hand. You can detach from your pole. Let's say you need to reach for Kleenex or, reach into a pocket or something, and you need to detach from your pole. You don't have to take the whole strap off. Lots of companies are doing that now. But this pole is very sleek. It's very, very lightweight. Nordic Walking uses your poles behind you or next to you. There is only one of 4 techniques that takes those poles and puts them in front of you. Because in Nordic Walking, if you remember the comparison to a road bike, we want speed. And I don't mean speed as in you have to walk fast, but speed as in forward propulsion at a pace that works for you. You control the pace, of course, but that forward propulsion is helping you. And so the poles are angled behind you, and I will show you in just a moment. And because it doesn't have to come in front of you, it doesn't need a swing weight. Because there's no swing weight, this pole is extremely light, and that's very desirable.
Can I ask, Jackie, are these poles, do they collapse, or are they non-collapsible?
All of the above.
Okay.
So the biggest point in all the choices, and I have them to show you, is that a fixed length pole is going to be the strongest pole. And it's the pole that I don't recommend unless you are a strong athlete and going to be using poles for doing something like circuit training, which again, I will mention that again in a little bit. The need for a fixed length pole just isn't there. And the average person wears different shoes. That changes your height. Your posture will improve with Nordic walking. That will change your height. And so I really don't recommend investing in a fixed length pole. Having adjustments, you can have a very small adjustment like this pole. This pole, the ability to adjust is this much. So it can go that tall and it can go that short. So you've got it's approximately 7 inches worth of change. That is called a semi-adjustable pole. This one is a fully adjustable pole. It has one adjustment point. This particular company offers the push button. And so if that's something that's desirable, you can adjust it and then it'll pop back into, just popped. So it'll pop into place. So that even though it has this sleeve on here, this sleeve has nothing to do with the stability of the pole. So it's just there as a finishing touch. But a fully adjustable pole, this pole will adjust that far with that much overlap. So this pole is good for somebody who is on the upper end of the 4 foot, probably 4'10", 4'11", all the way up to someone who's 6 foot tall. That's a fully adjustable pole. Because it has that much material in it, it's a heavier pole. It's not dramatic, but it is heavier. And then there is what is often called travel poles. It has 2 points of adjustment. So it will fold down. You guys need to understand that my poles go through a tremendous amount of abuse. So like here's the upper part collapses down. This lower part would do the same. And so this pole has a better chance of fitting into a suitcase or a backpack with, maybe it'll be sticking up a little bit behind you, but it's much easier to travel with something that is not, full length. Then there's something called, because time just keeps marching on, a micro pole. This is a fabulous pole. It is fixed length, but I'll make an exception for this because it's so convenient. There's not many poles that will do this. It has a button you release, you slide it down, pull them apart, and it's kind of like tent stakes. This is awesome. They don't make a pole like this that has any adjustability. So that's why I said this is really the only exception that I make to a fixed length pole, is if something like this is desirable. So with that said, I'll also include that this particular awesome pole is considered a trekking pole. Now, talked about equipment. Yes, I sell poles.
Can I
Only
ask Jackie really quick, what is the price range like we're talking about? You mentioned sort of the cheaper end, but like what are we looking at?
I mean, you could walk into Walmart and buy poles for, I don't know, used to be 20, maybe it's 40 now, but that gets right back into that safety issue. The range that I find that are safe and good customer service from the company are some of the poles that make the best ski poles, such as Lakey. I think you've seen me flashing this about, Lakey is the #1 ski pole manufacturer in the world. So their cutting edge technology gets translated into every pole that they make. The customer service is excellent. If something fails, it's a problem to them also, and they're very good about customer service, although I've never had a Lakey pole fail. And then there's another company that, and Lakeys are expensive. You're looking at probably 200 for a really good Nordic walking pole. Their lower end poles are not bad. They are clunkier in that they have more adjustment points, or they're a little heavier, or they have an old-fashioned strap system. So the poles themselves are still top-notch, but you can pay more for conveniences. Something lighter, something made of carbon versus aluminum. Some poles are made of a combination, and that'll change the price as well. On the low end, I think you're looking at probably $80–90 on the low end for a pair, and then $200 to $225 on the high end for a pair. There's a company called Exerstrider. Now, I didn't get into the family tree of Nordic walking, but back in the day when Nordic walking was first developed, came to be, somebody had the idea, that was in Europe. And it began in Finland, and it was known as Nordic walking. And that is one branch of the family tree. Here in the United States, another branch of the family tree was happening, and that was with Tom Rutland of Exerstrider. They knew nothing of each other. This was just happening simultaneously. And Tom was an engineer by trade and a runner, and his knees were giving him a lot of trouble. And he thought, I'm an engineer, I should be able to come up with something to make my running easier. And he came up with his pole. I recommend highly taking a look at his website. He has all kinds of videos, and his site's great. He does not use a strap system at all. He uses an ergonomic handle with a flange at the bottom to press down against, just like I was having you guys do earlier. This is great for the middle of the road and people looking for stability. If you're a very accomplished athlete, this pole may be a little too bulky for you, but you would have to feel it and give it a try and see for yourself. Exerstriding is the technique is slightly different also. And I think I would like to show you guys what I'm talking about when I say technique. Okay, so these poles do not have their straps on them right now. I'm not going to take the time to put it on. Just want to demonstrate a couple of things. So the European Nordic walking uses a very long arm and leg stride. So it's considered to be a little bit more advanced. But if you run it all, you would most likely enjoy the European Nordic walking. It is made to mimic cross-country skiing. But because skiing has a glide and walking doesn't, it uses that really long stride. North American Nordic walking takes that stride length in just a little bit, and we so hard to show indoors, but basically we just have the poles angled behind us. Every time our arm swings back, the pole tip will plant. And as we step through that stride, we're pushing with our hands against the strap and the handle. And then we take the next step, and that pole tip is always in that rear facing angle. Each time we stand with poles, that pole tip plant is there, whether it's way behind us for European, a bit behind us for North American, or angled backwards right next to us. That's extra striding technique. The pole tip engaging with the ground is where all the benefits are coming from. Now, I will say that when I engage with extra striding technique, that particular technique engages the core more because of how forward your arms are. I'm never taking my body out of a natural position. I'm never leaning into it, but the poles help me be very much upright. So posture is improved. With extra striding, the arms stay in front of the body, but you can see that the pole tips never come in front of my body. They're always angled back. In North American, my arm stride is at my side. And if I were to let the pole tips come down on the ground, you'll see that those pole tips are behind me. In European, that arm stride is the same, but very large. And again, those pole tips still never come in front of me. The one technique that I teach that brings the pole tips completely in front of me is called punch pull. And that is the most stable. And that is the technique that I teach people who have injuries, illnesses, and special needs. Yet for everybody else, it's the perfect technique when your terrain changes. If for some reason there's loose sand, wet leaves, mud, something that might make your pole tips slip. If you're going to walk through a big mud puddle and you see it's right in front of you, you can change your technique to that punch pull and enhance your stability so that you never slide. That's kind of hard to kind of wrap your brain around. It's a lot of words. It's a lot of things like, maybe I get it, maybe I don't. And that's the kind of stuff I cover in classes or one-on-one. We'll spend some time with that. But those are the 4 techniques that I teach that I've kind of embroiled it all down to. And
I was just going to say, Jacki, so Jacki and I met, and she was our walking expert for our walking challenge we did last year. And Jacki had told me about Nordic walking briefly when we spoke, and I was so interested. I walk all the time. But honestly, I was envisioning forward pulls the entire, from like when we spoke in July until now, having not watched or looked at anything on this until I listened to you. My visuals look completely opposite of what I thought it was going to be like. So this is, very mind blowing to me right now. I was picturing just like, I don't know, right. Like walking in front, like not that the poles would be behind me.
Yeah. Nordic walking wants to give you propulsion. Nordic walking, its purpose is to help you move right along. It's efficient. It will increase your pace a little bit not because you don't have control, but because it's helping you. You always have control. It should never push you faster than you're comfortable going. I don't want to make it sound like that at all, but that forward propulsion is the poles working for you. So when you have hills, you lean forward and you move your arms very far in front of you to get that pole tip planted in a good spot. And your arms are working every bit as hard as your legs to carry you up that hill, making that hill feel much easier. So you're definitely working smarter instead of harder.
Okay, our next question is, do you put a rubber tip on Nordic poles, as my trekking poles are pointed to dig in a bit where it is rocky, wet, snowy, or steep?
Absolutely. So all poles literally have this tip. This is a carbide tip. It's virtually indestructible. Over a long period of time, it could potentially wear down, but it doesn't abrade very much. It really, it's kind of, it's a little jagged up here, really strong. It's also, it's noisy and it's jarring. There's no cushion whatsoever. So when you're out on a trail in dirt, noise and vibration would never bother you. But when you're walking on sidewalk, that's not enjoyable. And so this particular style of a tip is what I recommend for Nordic walking. There are a number of tips out there. Some of them are just cylindrical. That would be great if you were doing punch pull, but when you have that backward angle, you really want something that's going to rock. I have one here. So this particular one gives you a tremendous amount of traction on the ground, which is great. And because of the angle, it will pivot, which is also great. If you don't have this much surface, you just never seem to get good traction. And so there are some smaller tips that look like this. This was an idea that Lakey came out with, and they were proved to be not so great because they had too many parts to it. But this is a really nice rubber tip. That's the shape of their tips. At any given point in time, let me see if I can show you. There, because of the curve, there's only like a finger's width amount of rubber on the ground for traction. It's not a good idea. It's just, it's a fail. But they thought it would be so cool to have their pointy tip within. So if you need the extra traction of the pointy tip, you pull the rubber tip down, and when you don't need it, you push it up and lock it in place. They weren't great. So yeah, when you're on hard surfaces, for cushion, for traction, and for sound dampening, use a tip. I encourage my students to always walk with a tip until they come to a point where they need to make a change. And I say, reach down and just pull these off, because they do. They literally just, they push on and you pull them off. Stick them in your pocket, continue your walk. When you no longer need this much of a bite, pull them out of your pocket, stick them back on, and continue. There is a direction to these little, I call them little boots. The toe of the boot is pointing behind you. So the heel of the boot is closest to your body when you're using your pulse. You have more questions?
I did. I was wondering, like, why isn't this more popular here? Because it seems to make a lot of sense, but I never really see anybody walking with poles. But for somebody that honestly looks like they're using them for balance and that's it, you know, somebody that might be older or injured.
So in Europe, they were and continue to be extremely popular. If you look at maybe some YouTube videos of races and events that are taking place in Europe, you'll see a lot of people using poles. Here in the United States, you know, the American mentality when it comes to sports is, more, harder, feel the burn. I mean, even look at what's happened with yoga. In the US, everybody wants to make yoga a sport rather than, a quiet practice. So I think that part of it is the American mentality is that poles are for people who need them. It's like, I'm going to use yoga again. How many people won't use yoga props because they think that the only people who need them are people who aren't as able. And it's just not true. So what I want to let people know is that here in the US, I think it's a perception. I think that people think that poles are for people who can't walk on their own. But there are so many ways of using poles in what I could consider advanced ways for the fitter population. You can use them in circuit training. You can use them in, exercising. No. Nordic walking, European style Nordic walking is extremely high end. It's not that it's difficult. It's that the amount of stride length and the amount of speed that's needed in order to do it properly requires a fit person. So there's a lot on the fit end. There's a lot on the mid end. Every single person who uses poles gets all of the benefits that we listed earlier. Every single one of them, 100% of the time. On the other end, people who do have some special needs, there are so many benefits that are offered to be able to help them get off the chair, get off the couch, and actually go outside and take a walk. I have a story, very short, of a student that I had when she showed up to one of my classes. When she walked, her feet never parted from one another. There was never any distance between them. She walked with steps, that were very, very close together. And she was completely hunched over. And she said she could no longer walk to get her mail. And that was her goal, was to be able to continue to get to the mailbox each day and get her mail. And I taught a 3-class series, and she took that series twice. So after 6 classes with me and practicing on her own, by the end of those 6 classes, which was in a 2-month period of time, she was separate. There was space between her legs, and she was standing upright using the punch pull method in front of her so that she could push down on the poles, bring her posture up, and engage her abdominal muscles. Because if you're bent over, it's very difficult to engage abdominal muscles. And so a tremendous change in a fairly short period of time for that particular person. I just think that there's something here for absolutely everybody.
All right. Stephen asked a question I was thinking about too, is how do you, or can you, use poles while walking a dog on a leash?
I wish I had a different answer, but the truth is, it's how well is your dog trained? If your dog will walk forward and not cross in front of you or pull behind you, put him on your waist, attach the leash to a hip pouch or something, and it's fine. The importance is not having anything that interferes with your side. Your arms need to be free to swing at your sides, and you wouldn't want the leash to get tangled in the poles. So it's really up to how your dog is trained.
So that would be a no for me. Not that the dog is not trained, but I walk too fast and I'm always pulling her behind. I'm like, come on, let's get going. She likes to stop too many times. Are there any other questions for Jacki out there too? I know we're sort of getting towards the end of our time, and I don't know, Jacki, if there's anything else that you wanted to cover before we're done here.
Oh, well, I talked about I guess I'll expand on the idea of circuit training, because that too is for anybody. When I talked about walking last time for CLA, one moment. I talked about how to add intervals, and I talked about using a rectangular shaped park as an example. You could take the long sides of the park and walk at a pace that gives you a little bit of cardio, just that little bit where if you can hold a conversation, great. If you can sing, you're probably not working hard enough. But if you can't talk, you're working too hard. That's my kind of suggestion for gauging what your effort is. So if you're going to walk the long side of a rectangle, maybe walk that at a pace where you could hold a conversation. The short end, you could pick your pace up and get to the point where you're just a little winded. Maybe conversation's not quite so easy, but still possible. And then when you come around to the long side again, bring your pace back down to something that you could talk to, with, and continue doing the park that way, however many times around you'd like. That's one way of incorporating a circuit. But I taught at Venice Beach a couple times for an event, and Venice Beach down in Southern California has a path area up towards the street, and there's this concrete border that goes all the way down for miles, and there are low parts of the concrete border that's like maybe a foot high, and then there's really tall that might be 2 or 3 feet high. And so those concrete barriers gave us lots of opportunities to walk, and then at a certain point in time of our choosing in advance, we would stop at one of these places, and perhaps we would use our poles to assist us stepping up onto the low part of the concrete barrier. And then we would do that for, a minute, 3 minutes, and then we would continue walking. And the next time we came to one of these areas where the height changed on the concrete, we would do another type of fitness exercise. We would do some lunges. We would take our poles in hand. We'd unclip, leave our straps on our hands, and just hold our poles this way up over our heads. And we would do some stretching, or we would just do some pulsing with muscularly adding tension to the activity. Even though we're not pressing against anything, our muscles are behaving as if. There were a number of things, and this was a 1 hour class, and the entire class we would have walking time broken up by all these other types of fitness exercises. Because we're at the beach, we also incorporated walking on sand. Walking on sand is another area, another level of difficulty that you can add, or walking on a hill. Trying to walk in places that give you a few opportunities are ways of going beyond just walking.
So next question, would those rubber tips you showed us before? Would they work on sand, or would you take those off in that kind of a situation?
You do not need to take them off. You can leave them on. I do want to show you. Sometimes you'll buy poles that have just the tip. Sometimes you'll buy a pole that comes with some form of a basket, whether it's like this or whether it's really small like that. The purpose of a basket is to make sure that your tip doesn't sink into your terrain. In snow, the poles for your skis have big baskets to keep the pole from sinking all the way into the snow. Same with sand. If you're in deep sand where you're really sinking in, it would probably be beneficial to have some sort of a basket on your pole, attached to your pole. If you're going to walk down by where the water is, the sand is going to be much more compacted, and the pointy tip will poke in a lot. So having the rubber foot on is beneficial there. I have never met a pole that was made out of materials that could not get wet. So don't hesitate to get your poles wet. If they get super sandy, you can easily take them apart, rinse them out, let them dry, put them back together. They're very, very durable and not usually affected by things like sand and salt water and regular water. So I'm
right. Yeah. He uses trekking poles mainly for hiking on steep trails, glaciers, rocky, muddy trails. He often uses those poles in front, except on flats when he can use longer strides. Downhill, he wants his poles a little longer, uphill a little shorter. So what adjustments do you make to poles when Nordic walking, when the roads or the terrain changes? So that's a great question.
I have a whole class on terrain change that includes uphill, downhill, sand, snow, mud. We talk about all of these things. If you're accustomed to using your poles, you have to be familiar enough to make a change to your pole quickly. Otherwise, you won't make that change because it'll be too bothersome. But to be able to change your height, like for instance, on this pole, you would get familiar with your posture in different situations. So if you know that going downhill, it would be beneficial to have another inch or two, you could easily just adjust your pole and keep going. Again, it's something that you would need to familiarize yourself with your own technique after having been using the poles for a little while. If going uphill, if you're really going uphill, making your poles very short could be very desirable because you're really leaning forward. You're putting your body very close to the face of the hill. So there's not a lot of space. So making your poles very short at that point would be important too. And then it's what kind of pole. Like this pole probably won't collapse down enough for what Stephen's suggesting. And so having a pole that is more adjustable to the style of your use. So I think that I mentioned in the description that I hoped that nobody would go running out and buying poles until there was a chance to talk. If you are in the market of poles, please feel free to get a hold of me and I can talk you through some more detailed things to look at. I'm in Sacramento, and here in Sacramento, REI is the only place that carries anything beyond the absolute cheap basic, and even their selection is has gotten very small. Yes, there's a tremendous amount available online. Have an idea of what you're looking for, how you're going to be using the poles. Are you a beginner? Are you a person who, like Stephen, who gets out there and hikes on trails and glaciers? You know, what is it that you're going to ask these poles to do? If you are going to primarily be walking in your neighborhood, then I suggest a Nordic pole that has some level of adjustability. If you are somebody who hikes off-road more frequently than going for a walk, you can use your trekking poles in the same way as a Nordic pole. Your experience will just be a little bit different. The pole will be slightly heavier. There's going to be a swing weight. The strap will be a little different. All of that is you can become accustomed to that. So it's not like you can only use this for Nordic and that for trekking. They are absolutely interchangeable as long as you understand what you're asking of your pole.
Like a somewhat related question, and maybe it's a silly one, but when you are going, so, I mean, I'm interested in the European, I'm tall, I have a long stride. People complain about walking with me all the time because of that. But if you're going uphill and downhill, is my goal to keep my stride the same, like going uphill and downhill, as far as like how wide and, you know, how long my stride is, I guess is the question.
Well, depending on the steepness of the hill, your body mechanics are going to change. And so then it becomes a question of what's appropriate for what you're trying to do and safety. So if if you're coming down a hill that's slightly wet, chances are you need to slow down and you need to decide whether your poles will serve you best behind you or in front of you. And I'll give an example. If you're not going super fast and the grass on this particular hill is mostly wet, chances are putting your poles behind you and using it in a way that if you began to slip, you would use your poles to help you sit down on the grass. So you're not tumbling head over poles over heels. So that question would be something that I would fine tune with you one-on-one to understand, do you understand what you're doing with your poles in terms of the technique that you're using? And can you assess your terrain and have enough choices of how to address it with your poles? Because there's always more than one way.
Okay, thank you. I think that does answer my question. I don't know if anybody else has any other questions out there. Lauren did put in the chat a little bit back that Jacki did give, as I mentioned, our presentation back, I think it was in July, right before we started our walking challenge, about the essentials of walking. So please check that out. It was fabulous. A lot of stuff about posture, which I know I'm still hearing Jacki in my head when I walk to remember looking up, not down. I'm guilty of that. So all of those things. So look for that. Lauren also put Jacki's contact information. So if you have more questions about Nordic walking, poles, as she mentioned, reach out to her and you can contact her on those issues. And Jacki is our kickoff for our January Wellness Challenge. She's our first speaker. Thanks again, Jacki. We do have other events happening this month, as well as the matrix of checking in every day with a small wellness challenge that you can accomplish. And you can check that out on our webpage. So I don't think I see anything else in the chat besides thank yous to Jacki. And I guess that's all for us today. Again, thanks, Jacki, so much. This has been like 6 months in the making. I've been waiting to hear all about Nordic walking. So I was really looking forward to this one. So I appreciate your time yet again, our walking expert for CLA.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Have
All
a
right,
good day.
everybody, take care. Have a good one.